brief description of the members of the extended Spider-Man family in the 616 universe. Pete really needs no explanation. Bit by a radioactive spider at 15. His uncle dies, great power, great responsibility. He's a hero. There you go. Most of you know Miles Morales as well. He was the Spider-Man of the Ultimates universe who took up the mantle after Peter Parker died, and after Secret Wars in the Ultimates universe had ended, he finds himself in the 616 universe, where he's lived ever since. Ben Reilly, on the other hand, is Peter Parker's genetic clone. He's the first clone we see Pete interact with. He was created by the villain the Jackal to, torment Peter and make him question whether or not he was actually Peter Parker or if the clone was. Pete originally thought that his clone died, but it turned out that he lived. He originally exiled himself, cut his hair, dyed it blonde, and named himself Ben Reilly for Uncle Ben and May's maiden name Riley. After about 5 years, though, he comes back into Peter's life, they reconcile, and he goes on to become the Scarlet Spider. Which brings me to the other and more recent Scarlet Spider, Kane Parker. It turns out Kane was actually the first clone made of Peter, not Ben. Now, at first he seemed like a success. He eventually started deforming. His face is kind of scarred up, and he was mentally unstable. Despite his deformities, the Jackal, the one who created him, let Kane live just as a test to kind of see how long that he would survive like this, and it turned out he lasted a lot longer than anyone thought. Kane actually first shows up, though, as a murderer and trying to ruin Ben Reilly's life. See, behind the scenes, Norman Osborn had the files switched for Peter and Ben Reilly so that Pete would think that he was the clone and that Ben Reilly was the original. Turns out Kane found the files, thought the same thing, so he set out to ruin Ben Reilly's life because he hated him for being the original and wanted Peter to have a great life as the clone, a life that Kane himself never did get. Also do this thing where he would stick his hand to people's faces and rip it off, and that was called the Mark of Cain. It was pretty fucking wild. Good guy though. Now he took up the mantle of the Scarlet Spider. Next we have Cindy Moon, aka Silk. She was actually in attendance at ESU during the demonstration that caused Peter Parker to get his spider-like powers. The spider that bit Pete actually ended up biting Cindy as well. Her life went to shit when the eccentric millionaire known as Ezekiel Sims shows up. He knew a lot about the inheritors and the spider totems and all of that, and he told Cindy for her own protection. He was scared the inheritors would come knocking, so he locked her up in a vault for 10 years. Next we have Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman. Jessica's father was a genius genetic scientist who actually ended up working with a high evolutionary. Jessica's father actually discovered one day that they had a shit ton of uranium on their land, which was a great thing because they could sell it and it funded his scientific experiments. But after a couple years of exposure, Jessica fell very sick because of this. Her father had been studying the regenerative properties of arachnid blood and concocted a serum made of different genetic species of spiders. Injected Jessica with it, and a combination of that, the uranium radiation in her blood, she was put into a genetic accelerator, which kept her in a stasis for years. Eventually it did, it healed her, but when she came out, she was a half-human, half-spider hybrid. Next we have Anya Corazon, aka Spider-Girl. One day in a park, she sees a man being attacked by a strange group known as the Sisterhood of the Wasp. As they go to kill him, she jumps in the way, saving the man's life. Now this dude turned out to be a sorcerer for the Spider Society, and realizing Anya had the bravery and the qualities to be their new hunter, he transferred some of his power into her, effectively saving her life. Finally, we have Julia Carpenter, the new Madam Web. Now, Julia herself, one time being a Spider-Woman, she was trapped by the Kravinoff family along with Madam Web and several other members of the Spider family. But as Madam Web had been mortally wounded, she takes her last seconds to give Julia all of her powers, effectively blinding her in the process. Now, for the record, I'm not including Gwen because she is from Earth 65 and not a mainstay. Just couldn't find a picture of all of them together online, and the one with Gwen in it was the best thing I could use to Photoshop the rest of them in, albeit very poorly. Hope you all enjoyed and that I didn't bore you too much.